Alright, hello everybody. Today we're going to be doing dividing decimals by whole numbers and estimating, and this is part 2. So if you didn't watch the first video already, I definitely recommend watching the first video. It's more of an intro. And in this video, we're going to move a little bit faster, and we're also going to be getting into some things that are a little bit more complicated, okay? So make sure you watch that first video. Alright, so we're going to start with the math problem all the way to the left here. 381 divided by 5. I'm not necessarily going to estimate every time for these ones. I guess we could estimate for these ones. So I'm thinking 381, I'm going to round it up to 400. I could say 400 divided by 5. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's probably about 80, right? Because I see 5 goes into 48 times, and then there's a 0, so 80. So I guess I'll just estimate every time in this video. All right, so that's my estimate, and we are going to be dividing some decimals over here, but for our ones over here, we're not dividing decimals, but we're going to be trying to get a decimal answer, okay? So I know my answer is going to be near 80, so that's a great place to start. So let's start by going, okay, 5 goes into 3, does not, in fact. 5 goes into 38, how many times? Well, 7. 35, 3, bring down the 1. 5 goes into 31, how many times? 6 times. Okay, now we have 1. So we are at this point now where I want us to think, okay, technically, I'm just going to write it up here. Technically, it's a remainder of 1, right? Or that there's one left over that I guess we would just call it a remainder up to this point if you don't know any other way. Some people might also think of it as 1/5, right? Because if we had 4 more pieces, then it would be able to be a complete 5 could go into the 5 pieces. But anyway, for today, we're saying it is remainder 1. This is our remainder 1, right? But we know, if you think back to subtracting decimals, that 381 is the same thing as, right? So it is equal to 381 and then 0 tenths, 0 hundredths, right? 0 thousandths, and so forth. So I'm going to use that knowledge of this right here. I'm going to use that knowledge to say, well, I could write a decimal point here. I could put a 0 here, and this number is still staying the same, but now I can bring down this 0, which is super helpful. If I put the 0 right there, I go, okay, well, now I have something to work with. 5 goes into 10 how many times? 2 times 10, and I'm done. Okay, so let's just go over this again. We said we put a decimal point here, we put a 0 here, and we kept everything the same in order to get rid of our little remainder piece. And now, if you watch the first video, remember we just bring the decimal point up, and I would get 76 and 2 tenths. It's a kind of a wonky 76. I guess I could straighten that up. 76 and 2 tenths. And is that close to our estimate, 80? Yes, it is, right? All by just slipping in this 0 at the end. So our example over here, 9 divided by 8, is another really great example of how and why this is so useful. So 8 goes into 9 how many times? Well, if I do 8 divided by 9, and I could kind of make that an estimate, it's basically pretty close to 8 divided by 8. So, oops. So I'm going to say that is about 1. So my estimate is 1. So 8 goes into 9 how many times? So 1 time, 8. And there's 1. And I would say, okay, it goes into 1 whole time, and then there is 1 left over, remainder 1. So once again, I'll just write that up here. That won't be a very easy place. I'll just write it over here as like it was supposed to be remainder 1, but now I'm trying to get a decimal answer, right? I don't want to just get, okay. This could be, so you could even think about this. Let's think about this really quick. This could be like the same as $9, right? Divided by 8 people. So there's $9, there's 8 people. How are you going to share it, right? So you could think about that kind of as our problem right now. Well, I know that 9 is the same as 9 and 0 tenths. So I'm going to say, okay, bring down the 0. 8 goes into 10 how many times? 1 time. bring down the 2. Go say, okay, well, there's still this little remainder part, right? This 2. Now what? Well, I could actually put another 0, bring it down, make it 20, and say, okay, well, 8 goes into 20. How many times? I could say, well, okay, I'm going to say, well, twice. 16, subtract 4. So still, once again, another extra piece. So I'm thinking, okay, now what? Well, I can put another 0 on, and I hope you're seeing the pattern here. Say, okay, 8 goes into 40. How many times? 5. Now, I've got my answer up here, right? I've got my answer, and I've got to think about where do I put the decimal point? Well, if I've lined everything up, and I've talked about this in the other videos, right? So 9 and the 1, right? So I keep all my digits in order. Maybe even if you're not like Mr. Allen, if you put that line there, right? And I'm going to bring up this decimal point, and I have my answer of 1 and 125 thousandths. And that is close to my estimate down here of just 1, right? So my estimate is saying that my answer is reasonable, and because I know to move that decimal point up and keep everything in order, or in rows, columns, it's also saying it's right. Okay, so let's move on to my next problem over here. 94 and 6/10 divided by 4. Okay, so I'm going to estimate really quick. I'm going to say 94 is over 80, so that would have been easier. I guess I could round 94 up to 100 divided by 4 and say 25. A little bit of a high estimate, but still going to work for us. Okay, so we see this is 94 and 6/10. Okay, so we actually have our decimal point right here. So I'm not going to have to I'm not going to just be starting with whole numbers here. So just like normal, if you watch that first video, like I said, this is part 2. If you watch the first video, this will look pretty standard at first. And we'll go 4 goes into 9 2 times. Subtract 8. Bring down the 4. 4 goes into 14 3 times. Good. 2. Bring down the 6. And now, right about now is where you expect things to wrap up, right? If you're used to just whole number division and you're like, okay, this is where we're going to get the nice little wrap up or the remainder. That's not happening today, right? We're getting decimal answers. 4 goes into 26 6 times. 24. 2. Now, right about now is the time where you say, okay, remainder 2, right? And you call it quits. But no, not today, folks, right? Today, we are getting decimal answers. So, what do? Well, I can put this 0 here, right? And you guessed it, bring it down. And now I've got 4 goes into 25. And this one actually wrapped up nice and quick. That is that. Okay, so I bring that decimal point up. And this is the answer I got. Let's check it against my estimate. 25. So that is actually pretty close, especially since I said 25 is a high estimate, right? It's a high estimate because I rounded up. So, yeah, so I'm going to go with that's the right answer. And remember, we could always double check this by doing something 23 and 65 hundredths times 4. I'm not going to do that for us today, but if you're the type of person who really likes to just check, and double check, and triple check, make sure you're right, that's definitely how you could double check your answer. Great. Let's move on to this last one. 63 and 3/10 divided by 4. All right, I'm going to do a quick estimate. So I'm thinking, well, it would be easy to do 40 divided by 4 and get 10, but it's more than that. So 40, maybe 60. So this would definitely be something I think if I was not used to estimating, this would probably be tricky. So I'm going to say 40, and then I see it's about 20 more divided by 4. And be 5, so I'm just going to say 15 is my estimate. I know that's not the normal way to estimate. Maybe if you're like a really good at math in your head, you could just go 60 divided by 4, and you'd get the same answer, right? Because that's basically what I did was a partial products sort of division. But whatever works for you when you're estimating. If you just round it down to 40 and say around 10, that'll probably be good enough. All right, so let's hop to it. 6 divided by 4. So 4 goes into 6 one time. 4, subtract 2, bring down the 3. 4 goes into 23 5 times. 23, bring down the other 3. 4 goes into 33 8 times. 32, subtract 1. All right, so once again, right about now is where your old whole number dividing self usually says, aha, our remainder, but no, not today, right? We're getting decimal answers. So we know that 63 and 3/10 is the same as 63 and 30/100, and I'm going to bring down that nifty 0. That becomes oh so useful all of a sudden. I'm going to say 4 goes into 10. How many times? I would say 2 times. 2 times. I'm actually going to extend this line, so this is definitely a good trick. You want to know. Extend that line. Don't confuse yourself. 4 goes into 10 2 times. So I'm going to say 8, 2. Okay, so it's not over yet, right? It's not over yet. You'll find sometimes with dividing numbers and getting a decimal answer, it tends to go on for a while. So bring down the 0. 4 goes into 20. That looks like it'll wrap it up. 4 goes into 25 times. 20 minus 20, 0. Okay, and that's that. Now, I want to make sure my answer is close to my estimate. So I'm going to say, well, if my estimate was 15, then the decimal point should go there, and I see my decimal point moves up. And since everything was lined up, right, everything is lined up. That's big. It's big to line things up. That's big. Okay, I agree with my answer. I do want to just point out, if I had rounded 60 to 40, and then 40 divided by 4, that would have been rounding 63 down a lot, and I would have gotten 10, and my answer was 15. So it would have been off, but it would have not been crazy off. So once again, if you are trying to just do a really quick estimate, sometimes that's what you want to do, just a really quick, sometimes sloppy estimate, because we know your estimate is not going to be exact anyway. So that's that. So what did we cover this round? We covered estimating. Definitely a big thing, checking your answer against an estimate, make sure it's reasonable. And then we definitely a big part of today was adding these zeros on the end, okay? Or I shouldn't say adding, should I say placing, right? Putting these zeros on the end. Sometimes it even involves this decimal point on the end of a number, right? We had to make up this whole, I'll highlight that in green, make it separate, right? When we added that decimal point, placed that decimal point too, that was new because these were originally whole numbers, right? It was 381 divided by 5. There was no decimal point. Same with 9 divided by 8. There was no decimal point. Okay? So that's all for today's video. I hope this helped. Post a comment below or a question if you have any. And that was our video on dividing decimals by whole numbers and getting decimal answers.